The notification chimed on my phone at exactly 11:47 p.m. while I was reviewing tenant applications in my home office. David had just texted me a single line that would change everything. Don't wait up. Working late again with the team on the My Henderson project. What he didn't know was that I'd been tracking his location through our shared family plan for the past 3 months, and his phone had been pinging from Jessica Walsh's downtown apartment since 6 p.m., nowhere near the office, or any Henderson project meeting. I set down my phone and returned to the rental application in front of me, a small smile playing at my lips. Some lessons I'd learned are best taught through experience rather than confrontation. The application was for my newest property, a luxury high-rise unit in downtown Austin that commanded $3,000 a month in rent. The applicant had excellent credit, worked at a prestigious tech company, and had provided all the necessary documentation. His name was David Rodriguez, and he had no idea he was about to become my tenant. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma Chen-Rodriguez, though most people in Austin's real estate circles know me simply as Emma Chen. 5 years ago, when David insisted I should focus more on family and less on what he called my marketing hobby, I made a decision. That would prove to be the smartest financial move of my life. Instead of arguing with my husband about returning to my corporate marketing career, I quietly began investing in real estate using the money from my inheritance and the freelance consulting work I'd been doing on the side. Austin was booming, and while David spent his evenings complaining about traffic and gentrification over dinner, I was busy buying distressed properties in East Austin neighborhoods that I could see were about to transform. David never paid attention to my activities beyond asking occasionally if I was still playing with those little rental houses. He assumed my real estate ventures were a small-time hobby, maybe bringing in a few $100s a month while he focused on his important work as a senior operations manager at Meridian Tech Solutions. The irony was that David's dismissive attitude toward my work was exactly what allowed me to build something substantial without his interference. While he saw our family finances in traditional terms, his salary supporting our lifestyle while my contributions were merely supplementary, I had systematically constructed a portfolio of 12 rental properties that generated more monthly income than his corporate position. The properties were all held under my business entity, Chen Properties LLC, and David had never bothered to ask about the details of my little real estate thing. Our marriage had been comfortable for the first 10 years, built on the typical division of labor where David handled what he considered the important financial decisions while I managed the household, raised our 3 children, and pursued what he viewed as my harmless interests. Maya was 16 now, a junior at Westlake High School where she played first-chair violin in the orchestra. Lucas, 13, spent most of his free time building robots in our garage and competing in STEM competitions. Sophie, our 9-year-old, had inherited my eye for design and spent hours creating elaborate art projects that covered our refrigerator and half the kitchen walls. David had always been a devoted father in the ways that were visible and socially recognized. He attended the major events, helped with homework when asked, and provided well for our family's material needs. But over the past 2 years, I'd noticed subtle changes in our dynamic that had initially concerned me and eventually led to a growing emotional distance between us. He'd become increasingly dismissive of my opinions, particularly about financial matters, and had begun making unilateral decisions about our family's future without consulting me. The first red flag had been when he'd announced, rather than discussed, his decision to lease a new BMW without mentioning it beforehand. When I'd expressed surprise at the significant monthly payment, he'd responded with patronizing patience, explaining that I didn't understand the business necessity of maintaining a professional image in the tech industry. The second red flag had been his reaction to my suggestion that we consider upgrading one of our rental properties instead of taking an expensive family vacation to Europe. He'd dismissed the idea immediately, saying that my little properties weren't substantial enough to warrant diverting money from our real family priorities. The third red flag had been his increasingly frequent late nights at the office, often accompanied by what seemed like carefully rehearsed explanations about urgent projects and demanding clients. David had always been hardworking, but the pattern of staying out until after 10 p.m. several nights a week was new, as was his habit of taking phone calls in his car or in the backyard rather than in the house where the children or I might overhear. I'm not naturally suspicious, but I am naturally observant, a skill that had served me well in both marketing and real estate. Small inconsistencies in David's stories began to accumulate in my mind, like pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to complete. He'd mentioned working late on the Henderson project, but when I'd asked casually about Henderson at a company barbecue, his colleague had looked confused and said they hadn't worked with any client by that name in months. He'd claimed to be having dinner with his team to discuss strategy, but his credit card statements showed charges at intimate restaurants rather than the chain establishments typically chosen for group business meals. The revelation came through the most mundane of circumstances. David had asked me to find the address of a restaurant where we'd celebrated our anniversary years earlier, wanting to make a reservation for what he claimed was a client dinner. While scrolling through his contacts to find the restaurant information, I noticed an unusual pattern in his recent calls and messages. Jessica Walsh, whom I recognized as his executive assistant, appeared with remarkable frequency in his communication history, including calls and texts that occurred during evenings and weekends when work-related contact would be unusual. Jessica was 28, ambitious, and possessed the kind of polished professional appearance that had become increasingly important to David as he climbed the corporate hierarchy. I'd met her at several company events and had always found her competent and pleasant, though I'd noticed that she and David seemed to have developed an unusually collaborative working relationship. What I discovered in his phone records suggested that collaboration had evolved into something far more personal than professional communication. Rather than confronting David immediately, which my instincts told me would only result in denial and more sophisticated deception, I decided to gather more information before determining my response. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former Austin police detective who specialized in matrimonial investigations. Marcus was recommended by Carmen Santos, my best friend, and the real estate agent who had helped me purchase my first rental property. Carmen had used Marcus's services during her own divorce 3 years earlier and vouched for both his discretion and his thoroughness. Marcus's initial report confirmed what I had already suspected, but provided details that were more extensive than I had anticipated. David and Jessica had been involved in a romantic relationship for approximately 8 months, beginning shortly after the company's annual retreat in San Antonio. They met regularly at Jessica's downtown apartment, at restaurants outside our social circle, and had taken 2 weekend trips together, which David had disguised as solo business travel to Dallas and Houston. More significantly, Marcus discovered that David had been financing his relationship with Jessica using funds from our joint savings account and had opened a separate credit card account to pay for gifts, dinners, and weekend getaways. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The total expenditure over 8 months was nearly $15,000, money that had been designated for Maya's college fund and our family's financial security. I absorbed this information with a calmness that surprised even me. Perhaps some part of me had been preparing for this revelation for months, or perhaps my years of managing challenging tenants and difficult real estate transactions had developed my capacity for responding to crisis situations with strategic thinking, rather than emotional reaction. Either way, I found myself analyzing the situation with the same methodical approach I used when evaluating property investments. David's betrayal was not just romantic but financial, which meant that any response I crafted needed to address both dimensions of his deception. His assumption that I was financially naive and dependent on his income was not only insulting, but potentially dangerous to my children's future security. if he was willing to divert money from Maya's college fund to finance his affair, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't make other unilateral decisions that would jeopardize our family's stability. What David didn't understand, and what would soon become clear to him, was that his dismissive attitude toward my real estate investments had blinded him to the reality of our family's financial structure. While he focused on his corporate salary and the status symbols it afforded, I had quietly built an income stream that exceeded his earnings and provided far more long-term security than his employment-dependent compensation. The rental properties I had acquired weren't the little houses he imagined, but substantial investments in Austin's most rapidly appreciating neighborhoods. My crown jewel was a recently purchased luxury apartment building in downtown Austin, a 30-unit property that I had acquired through a combination of my accumulated profits and a commercial loan secured by my portfolio. The building catered to young professionals working in Austin's booming tech industry, offering upscale amenities and commanding premium rents. As I reviewed Marcus's report in my home office, I realized that David's relationship with Jessica had reached a stage where significant decisions were being made. According to Marcus's surveillance, David had been apartment hunting in downtown Austin, looking at luxury buildings that would be appropriate for a successful tech executive seeking to impress a younger girlfriend. The locations he was considering were all in the same general area as Jessica's current apartment, suggesting that he was planning to relocate closer to her, possibly as a prelude to ending our marriage. This information crystallized my understanding of the situation and clarified the response that would be most appropriate. David wasn't having a temporary affair that might be addressed through counseling and reconciliation. He was systematically planning a new life that excluded me and potentially compromised our children's stability. His willingness to use family funds to finance this transition demonstrated a level of selfishness and entitlement that made me question how well I had ever really known the man I'd been married to for 15 years. I spent the following week maintaining our normal family routines while privately consulting with Robert Kim, a family law attorney who had been recommended by several of my real estate colleagues. Robert specialized in high-asset divorces and had particular expertise in cases involving business ownership and complex property arrangements. His initial assessment of my situation was encouraging from a legal standpoint, though he warned me that David's corporate connections and presumed financial advantage might make him initially overconfident in any divorce proceedings. The beauty of my position, as Robert pointed out, was that David's lack of attention to my business activities meant he had no accurate understanding of my actual financial status. While community property laws in Texas meant that assets acquired during marriage would be subject to division, my careful documentation of the sources of my investment capital and the business structure I had established would provide significant protection for my real estate portfolio. More importantly, David's financial misconduct in diverting family funds to support his affair would strengthen my position in any custody or support negotiations. Robert advised me to document everything carefully and to avoid any confrontation with David until we had completed a thorough analysis of all marital assets and debts. As I implemented Robert's recommendations, I found myself experiencing an unexpected sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I was operating from a position of genuine power rather than merely reacting to David's decisions and assumptions. The real estate investments that he had dismissed as unimportant were about to provide me with both financial security and negotiating leverage that he could never have anticipated. The final piece of irony in this situation was still unknown to David, but would soon become the centerpiece of his education about the woman he had chosen to underestimate. Among the apartment listings that Marcus had observed David reviewing was Unit 2847 at the Meridian Tower, a luxury high-rise in downtown Austin. The unit offered panoramic views of the city, premium finishes, and proximity to both David's office and Jessica's apartment. It was exactly the kind of prestigious address that would appeal to David's image-conscious sensibilities and provide the perfect backdrop for his new life. What David didn't know, and what I was anticipating with increasing amusement, was that the Meridian Tower was owned by Chen Properties LLC. In 6 months, when his lease application was approved and he moved into his new luxury apartment, David Rodriguez would be paying rent to his soon-to-be ex-wife, Emma Chen. The next morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. David showered, dressed in his pressed shirt and carefully selected tie, and kissed me goodbye with the same routine affection he'd displayed for 15 years. He ruffled Lucas's hair as our son hunched over his cereal bowl, reminded Maya about her violin lesson after school, and promised Sophie he'd help her with her science project that evening. To any observer, we appeared to be the picture of suburban family stability. As his BMW pulled out of our driveway in Westlake Hills, I poured myself a second cup of coffee and opened my laptop to begin the most important project of my professional life. The strategy I developed over the following weeks would require the same careful planning and attention to detail that had made my real estate investment successful, but the stakes were infinitely higher. This wasn't about acquiring another rental property or negotiating a favorable loan terms. This was about protecting my children's future and ensuring that David's betrayal wouldn't devastate the life we had built together. My first call was to Lisa Thompson, my property manager and business partner who had helped me scale my real estate portfolio from a single duplex to 12 properties. Lisa had a background in corporate finance before transitioning to real estate management, and her analytical approach to problem-solving had been invaluable in growing Chen Properties LLC into a substantial operation. More importantly, I trusted her completely, and I needed someone who could help me navigate the complex logistics of what I was planning. Lisa arrived at my house within an hour, her usual efficiency evident in the way she spread documents across my dining room table and opened her laptop with practiced precision. She listened without interruption as I explained the situation, occasionally making notes, but mostly absorbing the information with the same professional focus she brought to analyzing property investments. When I finished describing David's affair and my discovery of his financial misconduct, Lisa leaned back in her chair and studied me with something that might have been admiration. "So, let me understand this correctly," she said slowly. "Your husband has been using family money to finance his relationship with his secretary, he's planning to leave you for her, and he has no idea that you own a real estate portfolio worth more than his annual salary." I nodded, appreciating Lisa's ability to distill complex situations into their essential components. "That's accurate, and based on the apartment listings Marcus observed him reviewing, he's planning to lease a unit in the Meridian Tower." Lisa's eyebrows rose slightly. The Meridian Tower was our most prestigious property, the acquisition that had established Chen Properties as a serious player in Austin's commercial real estate market. We'd purchased the building 18 months earlier, when the previous owner needed to liquidate quickly due to financial difficulties. The building commanded premium rents and maintained a waiting list of prospective tenants eager to secure units in downtown Austin's most desirable address. "He doesn't know you own the Meridian," Lisa stated, rather than asked. "He has no idea. To him, I'm still the woman who plays with little rental houses while he handles the real financial decisions. He's never bothered to ask about the details of my business operations, and I've never volunteered information he didn't request." Lisa opened her laptop and pulled up the current vacancy report for the Meridian Tower. "We have 3 units coming. Available in the next 60 days, she noted. Unit 2847 matches the specifications Marcus described David reviewing online. Corner unit, 20th floor, city views, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. Rent is $3,800 per month. I felt a familiar thrill of anticipation, the same sensation I experienced when identifying an undervalued property with significant potential. "What would you need to ensure David's application receives favorable consideration?" "His credit score is excellent. His employment verification will check out, and his stated income exceeds our minimum requirements by a comfortable margin," Lisa replied, scrolling through the application criteria. "Unless there are red flags in his background check, he'd be approved automatically. The only question is timing." We spent the next 2 hours developing a comprehensive plan that would position me strategically for whatever direction David chose to take our marriage. The plan had multiple components, each designed to protect my interests while documenting David's choices and their consequences. First, we would ensure that David's apartment application at the Meridian Tower proceeded smoothly through the approval process. Lisa would personally handle his file to ensure there were no complications or delays that might prompt him to seek housing elsewhere. This would give me maximum leverage when his true situation became clear. Second, I would begin documenting our family's financial structure more thoroughly than ever before. Robert Kim had advised me to create a clear paper trail showing the sources of my investment capital and the growth of my real estate portfolio, independent of David's income. This documentation would be crucial in any divorce proceedings, particularly given Texas's community property laws. Third, I would start having careful conversations with Maya, Lucas, and Sophie about potential changes to our family structure, not revealing David's affair, which would be inappropriate and harmful, but preparing them psychologically for the possibility that their parents might need to live separately for a while. These conversations would need to be handled with extreme delicacy, providing reassurance about their security while acknowledging that adult relationships sometimes evolve in difficult ways. Fourth, I would begin transitioning more of my consulting, work into higher-profile projects that would demonstrate my professional capability and earning potential. While my real estate portfolio provided substantial passive income, I wanted to establish clearly that my professional skills extended far beyond what David had characterized as hobby-level activities. Lisa helped me implement the first phase of this strategy immediately. She called the Meridian Towers leasing office and informed them that a high-priority application would be submitted within the next few days. As the building's owner, represented through our property management company, I had the authority to expedite processing for applications that met our criteria. The applicant is a senior executive at Meridian Tech Solutions, Lisa explained to our leasing agent. Excellent credit, stable income, looking for a premium unit for immediate occupancy. I want this application fast-tracked through approval so we can close the lease quickly. After Lisa left, I spent the afternoon reviewing the financial documents that Robert Kim had requested. The exercise was both enlightening and empowering, forcing me to recognize the full scope of what I had built while David focused on his corporate advancement. My real estate portfolio had appreciated significantly since my initial investments, benefiting from Austin's explosive growth and my strategic focus on emerging neighborhoods. The numbers were impressive even to me. My 12 properties generated monthly rental income of approximately $18,000, with expenses and mortgage payments leaving me with net positive cash flow of nearly $8,000 per month. The properties had appreciated in value by an average of 12% annually, creating substantial equity that could be leveraged for additional investments or accessed if needed for family expenses. More significantly, my business structure had been designed from the beginning to provide tax advantages and asset protection that David's employment-based income couldn't match. Chen Properties LLC was established as a legitimate business entity with proper accounting, legal compliance, and strategic planning that positioned it for continued growth regardless of changes in my personal circumstances. That evening, as our family gathered for dinner, I observed David's behavior with new awareness of the deception he was maintaining. He answered Maya's questions about her upcoming college visits with apparent interest, helped Lucas troubleshoot a programming problem with his latest robot, and admired Sophie's newest artwork with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. To an outside observer, he appeared to be a devoted father and husband whose attention was fully focused on his family. But I noticed details that I had previously overlooked or dismissed. The way he checked his phone frequently during dinner, glancing at notifications even when engaged in conversation with the children. The careful way he answered when Sophie asked about his plans for the weekend, providing just enough detail to sound specific while maintaining flexibility for changes. The slight tension in his posture when I mentioned casually that I'd had Lunch with Carmen Santos, and we'd discuss some new investment opportunities. After the children finished their homework and settled into their evening routines, David retreated to his home office to catch up on some project files. I used this time to call Carmen and update her on the situation. Carmen had been through her own divorce 3 years earlier and understood both the emotional and practical challenges of ending a marriage while protecting children's welfare. "The landlord angle is brilliant," Carmen said after I explained my strategy. "He's going to be paying you rent while probably complaining to Jessica about how expensive everything is after his divorce. There's a certain poetic justice in that arrangement." Carmen's perspective was valuable because she understood the Austin real estate market intimately and could help me anticipate potential complications with my plan. She also had insights into how divorce proceedings typically unfold when significant assets are involved, having navigated her own complex settlement negotiations. "What's your timeline?" she asked. "How long are you planning to maintain this approach before confronting him directly?" I had been considering this question carefully. "I want to give him enough rope to hang himself," I replied. "If I confront him now, he'll go into damage control mode and probably become more cautious about his financial misconduct. But if I wait until he's committed to a lease at the Meridian Tower and moved in with Jessica, his choices will be much more difficult to rationalize or reverse." Carmen understood my reasoning, but she also raised an important concern. "What? About the emotional toll on you? Living with this knowledge while he continues to deceive you isn't easy. And what about the children? They're perceptive enough to sense tension even if they don't understand its source." Her questions were valid and reflected concerns I had been wrestling with myself. Maintaining a facade of normalcy while knowing about David's betrayal required constant emotional management. I found myself analyzing every interaction, wondering how much of his apparent attention to our family was genuine and how much was guilt-driven compensation for his divided loyalties. The children were indeed perceptive, particularly Maya, who had begun asking questions about why I seemed different lately. I had deflected her concerns by attributing any changes in my demeanor to stress about work projects, but I knew that explanation wouldn't satisfy her indefinitely. Maya was 17 and possessed emotional intelligence that often surprised me with its accuracy. Over the following 2 weeks, I implemented my strategy with methodical precision. Lisa handled David's application for Unit 2847 at the Meridian Tower, ensuring that it moved through the approval process without complications. The application was approved within 5 business days, faster than our usual processing time, but not so fast as to raise suspicions about preferential treatment. Meanwhile, I began having subtle conversations with each of the children about resilience, change, and the importance of family bonds that transcend geographical arrangements. These conversations were carefully calibrated to prepare them psychologically for potential upheaval, without creating anxiety about specific threats to our family stability. With Maya, I focused on her upcoming transition to college and the excitement of new independence. "Change can be challenging," I told her as we shopped, "for dorm room supplies. But it's also an opportunity to discover strengths you didn't know you had. Sometimes the most difficult transitions lead to the most rewarding outcomes." With Lucas, I emphasized the problem-solving skills he demonstrated in his robotics projects. Complex problems often require creative solutions, I observed as he debugged a programming issue. The key is to analyze all the available information before deciding on your approach. Sometimes the obvious solution isn't the best one. With Sophie, I focused on the art projects that covered our refrigerator and kitchen walls. Creating something beautiful sometimes means starting over when your first attempt doesn't work out the way you planned, I said, as she worked on a particularly challenging watercolor. But the skills you learned from your first attempt make your second effort even better. Each of these conversations served multiple purposes. They provided me with opportunities to reinforce my children's confidence in their own capabilities They began preparing them psychologically for potential changes in our family structure, and they allowed me to gauge their emotional resilience and readiness for whatever challenges might lie ahead. During this period, David's behavior became increasingly predictable in its deception. His late nights at the office became more frequent. His explanations for weekend work commitments became more elaborate, and his attention to his appearance became more pronounced. He purchased new clothes, started using cologne he'd never worn before, and began working out regularly at a gym that was conveniently located near Jessica's apartment. The financial evidence of his affair continued to accumulate as well. Marcus's ongoing surveillance documented regular dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to wine country, and purchases at jewelry stores that coincided with what appeared to be relationship milestones. David was not only betraying our marriage, but financing his betrayal with money that should have been securing our children's future. Most tellingly, David began having conversations about our family's financial future that revealed his assumptions about my dependence on his income. During one particularly revealing discussion, he suggested that we should consider downsizing our house once Maya left for college, arguing that the mortgage payments were an unnecessary burden given my limited earning potential from real estate activities. "Your rental properties are nice supplemental income," he said with patronizing kindness, "but we shouldn't rely on them for major financial decisions. They're too unpredictable, and the real estate market can change quickly. My salary provides the stable foundation we need for long-term planning." I nodded agreeably while internally marveling at his complete misunderstanding of our financial reality. David's salary, while substantial, was entirely dependent on his continued employment at Meridian Tech Solutions. My real estate portfolio, by contrast, provided diversified income streams from multiple properties in different neighborhoods, backed by appreciating assets that could be leveraged or liquidated if necessary. His suggestion that we downsize our family home was particularly ironic, given that the house was one of my earlier real estate investments, purchased with my inheritance money and held in my name before our marriage. David had never paid attention to the legal details of our property ownership, assuming that marriage automatically meant joint ownership of all assets. The reality was more complex and far more favorable to my position than he realized. As the third week of my strategy implementation approached, I received confirmation from Lisa that David had signed the lease for Unit 2847 at the Meridian Tower. His move-in date was scheduled for the first of the following month, which gave me approximately 10 days to finalize my preparations for the confrontation that would reshape our family's future. The lease agreement was particularly satisfying to review. David had negotiated aggressively on certain terms, demonstrating the business acumen that had made him successful in his corporate role. He had insisted on a clause allowing early termination with 60 days' notice, probably anticipating that his living situation might change once he finalized his separation from me. He had also requested premium parking spaces and storage units, amenities that would support the lifestyle he was planning to share with Jessica. What David hadn't realized was that every concession he negotiated, every special request he made, and every premium service he demanded was being approved by his soon-to-be ex-wife. The rent he would pay, the security deposit he would provide, and the monthly fees for additional services would all flow directly into Chen Properties LLC accounts that I controlled completely. The irony was almost too perfect to believe, but it was also exactly the kind of poetic justice that made the months of careful planning worthwhile. David's assumption that I was financially naive and professionally limited had blinded him to the reality of my business operations. His dismissive attitude toward my real estate investments had prevented him from understanding the scope and sophistication of what I had built. In less than 2 weeks, David would move into his luxury apartment, believing himself to be entering a new phase of independence and professional success. Instead, he would be placing himself under my direct financial control in ways that he couldn't possibly anticipate. The rent he paid to impress Jessica would actually be funding my continued investment in properties he had dismissed as unimportant. The strategy was nearly complete, and the confrontation that would reveal the true balance of power in our relationship was approaching rapidly. David had made his choices based on assumptions about my capabilities and financial status that were about to be dramatically corrected. The woman he had underestimated for 15 years was about to demonstrate exactly how thoroughly she had outmaneuvered him. The morning of David's move-out day arrived with unseasonable warmth for early October. In Austin, I watched from our bedroom window as he loaded boxes into his BMW, making multiple trips to fit his belongings into a car that had been chosen for style rather than practicality. Jessica arrived in her silver Lexus to help with the process, her presence in our driveway marking the first time David had brought his affair directly into our family space. Maya had left early for a college visit to Rice University, a trip I had encouraged specifically to remove her from the house during this transition. Lucas was at his Saturday robotics club meeting, and Sophie was spending the weekend with my sister Rebecca in San Marcos. I had orchestrated these arrangements carefully, wanting to shield the children from the immediate tension of David's departure, while ensuring they wouldn't return to find him simply gone without explanation. David moved through the house with methodical efficiency, collecting personal items and clothes while avoiding the common areas where evidence of our 15-year marriage remained on display. Family photos still lined the hallway walls, Maya's violin music stood open on the piano in our living room, and Sophie's latest art project covered half of the refrigerator. He seemed to navigate around these reminders of our shared life with practiced detachment, focusing on the logistics of his exit rather than its emotional implications. I remained in my home office, ostensibly working on tenant applications, but actually monitoring David's activities and waiting for the conversation that would officially end this phase of our relationship. Lisa had confirmed that the Meridian Tower management expected him for his move-in appointment at 2 o'clock, and I knew from Marcus's reports that Jessica had arranged for professional movers to transport her belongings from her previous apartment to their new shared residence. At 11:30, David appeared in my office doorway carrying a single cardboard box containing items from his desk and bookshelf. He looked younger somehow, perhaps relieved by the prospect of ending months of deception, or maybe energized by the anticipation of starting fresh with Jessica. His expression was carefully composed, neither apologetic nor defiant, but simply resolved. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk where many of our important conversations had taken place over the years. This was where we had discussed buying our house, planned the children's education, and made decisions about family vacations and major purchases. Now it would be where we officially acknowledged the end of our marriage. I saved the document I had been reviewing and gave him my full attention, noting how he sat forward in the chair with his hands clasped, the posture he typically adopted when delivering news he expected to be poorly received. "I'm listening," I said simply, offering neither hostility nor encouragement. David took a measured breath before beginning what sounded like a carefully rehearsed speech. "Our marriage has been struggling for a long time," he began, his tone businesslike rather than emotional. "We've grown in different directions, and I think we both know that staying together isn't fair to either of us or to the children." The irony of him claiming concern for the children's welfare while abandoning them for his secretary was almost amusing, but I maintained neutral expression and allowed him to continue his explanation. He spoke about needing space to figure out what he wanted from his life, about feeling constrained by the responsibilities of family obligations, and about believing that we could co-parent more effectively if we weren't forcing a romantic relationship that had run its course. What was conspicuously absent from his speech was any mention of Jessica Walsh, any acknowledgement of his affair, or any reference to the financial misconduct that had funded his relationship. David was presenting our separation as a mutual recognition of incompatibility rather than the consequence of his betrayal. He was attempting to control the narrative from the very beginning, positioning himself as thoughtful and mature rather than selfish and deceptive. "I've found an apartment downtown," he continued, "and I think a temporary separation will give us both clarity about what we want for our future. The children can spend weekends with me once I'm settled, and we can work out a schedule that minimizes disruption to their routines." I listened to his entire presentation without interruption, fascinated by his ability to discuss the end of our marriage as if it were a business restructuring, rather than the result of his decision to pursue another woman. When he finished speaking, I leaned back in my chair and studied him with genuine curiosity. "That's a very reasonable approach, David," I said calmly. "I'm sure this decision wasn't easy for you, and I appreciate your consideration for the children's adjustment. Where did you say you found this apartment?" He seemed relieved by my measured response, probably having anticipated anger or emotional pleading that would position him as the rational party in our separation. "The Meridian Tower downtown," he replied with obvious pride. 27th. Floor, corner unit with city views. It's close to my office and has the kind of amenities that will make it comfortable for the kids when they visit. I nodded thoughtfully, suppressing a smile at his choice to emphasize the apartment's luxury features. David had always been conscious of status symbols, and the Meridian Tower represented exactly the kind of prestigious address that would appeal to his self-image as a successful executive. "That sounds like a substantial rent," I observed. "Downtown, luxury buildings can be quite expensive." "It's an investment in starting fresh," David replied, his tone suggesting that financial considerations were secondary to the personal growth he was pursuing. "Sometimes you have to spend money to create the environment you need for positive change." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with David outlining his vision for our co-parenting arrangement and his timeline for making the separation official through legal proceedings. He spoke about wanting to handle everything amicably, avoiding attorneys if possible, and focusing on what was best for Maya, Lucas, and Sophie. His presentation was so reasonable and considerate that someone unfamiliar with the actual circumstances might have been impressed by his maturity and thoughtfulness. What struck me most forcefully was how completely David had convinced himself that he was handling the situation appropriately. He genuinely seemed to believe that his approach was fair and responsible, that his concern for the children's welfare was authentic, and that his decision to end our marriage was the result of careful consideration rather than selfish impulse. After David finished explaining his plans, I asked a few clarifying questions about logistics and timing, maintaining the cooperative tone he had established. I confirmed that he would be staying at the Meridian Tower for the foreseeable future, that he intended to tell the children about our separation that evening when they returned home, and that he wanted to begin divorce proceedings within the next few weeks. "I think it's important to move forward decisively once we've made this decision," David explained. "Prolonging uncertainty isn't fair to anyone, especially the kids. They're resilient, and they'll adjust better if we present this as a positive change rather than dwelling on problems." Finally, David rose from his chair and extended his hand formally, as if we were concluding a business meeting rather than ending 15 years of marriage. "Thank you for being so understanding about this, Emma. I know it's not easy, but I think we're both going to be happier in the long run." I shook his hand briefly and walked with him to the front door, where Jessica was waiting beside their loaded cars. She offered me a tentative smile and a quiet hello that suggested she felt awkward about her role in this transition, but wasn't entirely apologetic about it. She was prettier than I had remembered from company events, with the kind of polished appearance that came from regular salon visits and careful attention to fashion trends. As David and Jessica drove away in their separate cars, heading toward the Meridian Tower and their new shared life, I experienced a moment of profound satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. David's assumption that I would passively accept whatever terms he offered, his belief that I was financially dependent on his generosity, and his dismissive attitude toward my professional capabilities were about to be comprehensively corrected. I spent the afternoon preparing for the children's return and the conversation we would need to have about their father's departure. Maya called from Houston to check in about her Rice University visit, and I could hear the excitement in her voice as she described the campus and the music program. I decided not to mention David's departure during our brief conversation, preferring to address the situation in person when she returned home the following evening. Lucas texted from his robotics meeting to ask if he could stay for an optional workshop on artificial intelligence programming. I encouraged him to participate, knowing that his passion for technology provided valuable continuity during periods of family disruption. Sophie called from Rebecca's house to report on their trip to Natural Bridge Caverns and to ask if she could extend her visit through Sunday evening. These normal interactions with my children reminded me why my careful planning and strategic approach had been necessary. Maya, Lucas, and Sophie deserved to have their lives disrupted as little as possible by their father's choices. My strategy had been designed not just to protect my own interests, but to ensure that their emotional and financial security remained intact regardless of David's decisions. At 6 o'clock, I received a text message from David confirming that he had completed his move-in process at the Meridian Tower and expressing appreciation for my mature handling of our separation. The message included a photo of his apartment's city view, apparently intended to demonstrate that he was settling into his new life successfully. What David didn't realize was that his text message had been sent to his new landlord. Every dollar of the rent he paid, every utility fee he incurred, and every maintenance request he submitted would flow through Chen Properties LLC systems that I controlled completely. The premium apartment he had chosen to impress Jessica was actually generating revenue for the business he had spent years dismissing as a hobby. I spent the evening reviewing the documentation Robert Kim had requested for our divorce proceedings, ensuring that every aspect of my financial position was clearly established and well supported by evidence. The contrast between my actual business operations and David's assumptions about my capabilities would be a central element in any legal negotiations. My real estate portfolio had grown substantially during the months of David's affair, benefiting from Austin's continued economic expansion and my strategic reinvestment of rental profits. The total value of my properties now exceeded $800,000, with monthly net income approaching $10,000. These numbers represented serious financial independence, not the supplemental hobby income David imagined. More importantly, my business structure had been designed from the beginning to provide maximum legal protection and tax efficiency. Chen Properties LLC was a legitimate business entity with proper accounting, legal compliance, and professional management systems. Any attempt by David to claim a significant portion of my real estate assets would face substantial legal obstacles, particularly given his documented financial misconduct during our marriage. Sunday evening brought the children home and the conversation I had been preparing for all weekend. Maya returned from her college visit energized by the possibilities she had discovered at Rice University. Lucas arrived full of enthusiasm about the artificial intelligence programming workshop and eager to implement new techniques in his robotics projects. Sophie came home with a bag full of rocks and fossils from her cavern exploration, ready to add them to her growing geological collection. I gathered all 3 children in our family room, the space where we had shared countless movie nights, birthday celebrations, and important family discussions. The room felt different now, somehow smaller, but also more secure, as if David's absence had removed a source of tension that I hadn't fully recognized while he was present. "I have something important to discuss with you," I began, keeping my tone calm and reassuring. "Your father and I have decided that we need to live separately for a while. He moved into an apartment downtown today, and we're going to try a new arrangement where you live here with me most of the time, but spend some weekends with him." Maya's immediate response was a question rather than an expression of surprise. "Is this because of his girlfriend?" she asked directly, her 17-year-old directness cutting through any attempt at euphemism. I had expected this question and had prepared for Maya's perceptiveness. "Yes, that's part of it," I admitted. Your father has developed a relationship with someone else, which has changed the dynamic of our marriage. But this decision is also about recognizing that we've grown in different directions over the years. Lucas, always analytical, asked about the practical implications. Will we have to change schools? Will you be able to afford the house without Dad's salary? What about college savings accounts? His questions revealed the kind of practical concerns that demonstrated his maturity and his understanding that family changes often have financial consequences. I was particularly proud of how thoughtfully he approached complex situations, and I wanted to answer his questions with complete honesty. You won't have to change schools, I assured him. I have income from my real estate business that's sufficient to maintain our current lifestyle. And college savings accounts are protected regardless of what happens between your father and me. Sophie, at 9, was primarily concerned about emotional continuity. Will Daddy still come to my art shows? Will he still help me with science? Projects? Will he still remember to call me on my birthday? Her questions were heartbreaking in their simplicity and their focus on the daily expressions of love that matter most to children. I pulled her onto my lap and held her while I answered, wanting her to feel completely secure despite the changes occurring in our family structure. Your father loves you very much, and that won't change because he lives in a different place, I told her. He'll still come to your art shows, he'll still help with science projects, and he'll always remember your birthday. The only thing that's changing is where he sleeps at night. The conversation continued for over an hour, with each child processing the news differently, but all of them asking thoughtful questions that revealed their emotional intelligence and resilience. Maya was primarily concerned about college planning and whether the separation would affect her ability to visit schools or receive financial support for her education. Lucas wanted detailed information about the logistics of splitting time between 2 homes and how decisions would be made about his activities and academic commitments. Sophie needed repeated reassurance that the separation wasn't her fault and that both parents would remain actively involved in her daily life. By the time we finished talking, I felt confident that the children were emotionally prepared for the transition ahead. Their questions had been mature and their concerns reasonable, reflecting the secure foundation David and I had provided despite the problems in our marriage. They would undoubtedly need ongoing support as they adjusted to our new family structure, but their initial responses suggested they possessed the resilience necessary to handle this change successfully. That night, after the children were settled, in their rooms, I sat in my home office reviewing emails from Lisa about the Meridian Tower operations. David's move-in had been completed without complications, and the building's management had noted in their daily report that the new tenant, in Unit 2847, had expressed satisfaction with the apartment's amenities and location. Reading about David's successful transition to his new residence from the perspective of his landlord created a surreal sense of satisfaction that was unlike anything I had experienced in my business operations. Every other property acquisition, every successful lease negotiation, and every profitable investment decision had been motivated by financial objectives and professional growth. This situation was different because it represented a form of poetic justice that extended far beyond monetary considerations. David's rent payment would be automatically debited from his checking account on the 1st of each month, flowing directly into Chen Properties LLC accounts that funded my continued investment in Austin's real estate market. The money he spent to impress Jessica would actually be supporting the business he had dismissed as unimportant for years. The luxury apartment he had chosen as a symbol of his independence would actually represent his financial dependence on the woman he had abandoned. The irony was perfect, but more importantly, the strategy was complete. David had made his choice based on assumptions about my capabilities and limitations that were fundamentally incorrect. He had positioned himself exactly where I needed him to be, financially and legally, for the next phase of our relationship. The confrontation that would reveal the true balance of power between us was no longer a future possibility, but an immediate reality that he simply hadn't recognized yet. In less than 30 days, when David received his first monthly statement from the Meridian Tower Management Company, he would discover that his rent checks were being deposited into accounts controlled by Chen Properties LLC. A few weeks after that, when he bothered to research the ownership of his prestigious new address, he would learn that his soon-to-be ex-wife was his landlord. The woman he had underestimated for 15 years had orchestrated the most comprehensive reversal of fortune imaginable, and David had cooperated completely with his own downfall. 3 weeks into David's new living arrangement, I received the call I had been anticipating with growing amusement. Lisa's voice carried barely suppressed laughter as she delivered the news that would mark the beginning of David's education about the woman he had chosen to underestimate. "He called the property management office this morning," Lisa reported, settling into the chair across from my desk at Chen Properties headquarters. Apparently, David decided to research the ownership structure of the Meridian Tower because he wanted to negotiate some changes to his lease terms. When he discovered that Chen Properties LLC owns the building, he asked to speak with the owner about a potential rent reduction. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the delicious irony of David requesting a meeting with his landlord to discuss financial concessions. After 15 years of dismissing my business acumen and characterizing my real estate investments as a hobby, he was now seeking to negotiate directly with the professional operation he had never bothered to understand. "What did you tell him?" I asked, though I suspected Lisa had handled the situation with her usual diplomatic efficiency. I informed him that the property owner occasionally takes meetings with tenants regarding significant lease modifications, and that I would check the calendar for availability, Lisa replied with obvious satisfaction. "I scheduled him for Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I thought you might want to prepare for what promises to be an enlightening conversation." The meeting was set for the following week, which gave me time to review David's tenancy file and consider how to handle what would certainly be one of the most awkward business encounters of my career. David's rent payments had been processed automatically through his bank's bill pay system, so he hadn't yet received documentation that would clearly identify Chen Properties LLC as his landlord. His lease agreement listed the management company as the primary contact, with ownership information buried in legal language that most tenants never examined carefully. David's decision to research the building's ownership structure suggested that he was taking his new living situation seriously and possibly planning for long-term residency. This development was particularly interesting, given that his lease included an early termination clause, which I had assumed he would use once our divorce proceedings made his financial obligations more challenging. I spent the intervening days preparing for our meeting with the same methodical approach I brought to any important business negotiation. I reviewed David's payment history, which was impeccable, and his interactions with building management, which had been minimal and professional. As a tenant, David was exactly the kind of responsible resident that property owners preferred: quiet, financially stable, and respectful of building policies. The irony was not lost on me that David's excellent qualities as a tenant contrasted sharply with his failings as a husband. His rent payments were always on time, his apartment was well maintained, and his behavior in common areas was considerate of other residents. If only he had brought the same level of responsibility and integrity to our marriage. Thursday afternoon arrived with typical Austin autumn weather, clear skies and comfortable temperatures that made downtown particularly appealing. I dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing a tailored business suit that projected professional authority without appearing unnecessarily formal. The goal was to establish immediately that this conversation would be conducted between business professionals, not estranged spouses seeking to relitigate personal grievances. David arrived at the Chen Properties office precisely on time, a habit that had served him well in his corporate career and apparently carried over into his real estate dealings. He was dressed in his standard business attire, navy suit with conservative tie, projecting the image of a successful executive accustomed to getting what he wanted through professional networking and strategic negotiation. Lisa escorted him to my office, maintaining the fiction that she was simply coordinating a routine meeting between property owner and tenant. David entered my office with confident stride, ready to present his case for lease modifications to someone he assumed would be a typical commercial property investor, probably a middle-aged man with a portfolio of downtown buildings. The moment of recognition was everything I had hoped it would be. David stopped mid-stride when he saw me sitting behind my desk, his expression cycling rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. For several seconds, he stood frozen in my office doorway, trying to process the reality that his soon-to-be ex-wife was the property owner he had requested to meet. "Hello, David," I said calmly, gesturing toward the chair across from my desk. "Please have a seat. I understand you wanted to discuss some modifications to your lease at the Meridian Tower." He moved slowly to the chair, his usual corporate confidence replaced by visible uncertainty about how to navigate this unexpected situation. David was accustomed to controlling business interactions through preparation and strategic positioning, but this meeting had caught him completely off guard. He had no prepared talking points for negotiating with his landlord, who happened to be his estranged wife. "Emma," he began, then stopped, apparently unsure whether to address me as his former spouse or as a business professional. "I had no idea that you owned the Meridian Tower. Your name wasn't on any of the documentation I reviewed." "Chen Properties LLC owns the building," I corrected gently. "I've used my maiden name for business purposes since I started investing in real estate. It provides certain advantages from a legal and financial perspective, as I'm sure you can understand." David nodded slowly, his analytical mind working to reassemble his understanding of both my business operations and the implications of our current situation. I could see him processing the reality that his luxury apartment, his symbol of independence and success, was actually owned by the woman whose professional capabilities he had dismissed for years. "How long have you owned this property?" he asked, his tone suggesting that he was beginning to grasp the scope of what he had failed to understand about my business activities. 18 months, I replied. It was a significant acquisition that required substantial capital investment and complex financing arrangements. The purchase price was $2.8 million, making it the largest single transaction in my real estate portfolio. The numbers clearly shocked David, who had never bothered to ask about the financial details of my property investments. His assumption that my real estate activities generated modest supplemental income was being systematically demolished by information he could have obtained at any point during our marriage, simply by expressing genuine interest in my work. "I never realized the scale of your business operations," David admitted, his voice carrying a note of respect that had been absent from his discussions of my career for years. "When you talked about rental properties, I pictured small residential houses, not commercial buildings in downtown Austin." "My portfolio includes both residential and commercial properties," I explained. "The residential investments provided the foundation for expanding into larger commercial acquisitions. The Meridian Tower purchase was financed through a combination of accumulated equity from my existing properties and a commercial loan secured by the portfolio's cash flow." David absorbed this information with visible amazement, finally understanding that my business operations were far more sophisticated and profitable than he had ever imagined. The little rental houses he had dismissed were actually the building blocks of a substantial real estate empire that generated monthly income exceeding his corporate salary. "This changes everything," David said, leaning forward in his chair, with the intensity he typically brought to complex business problems. "If your real estate income is as substantial as you're describing, then our financial situation for divorce negotiations is completely different from what I assumed." His immediate focus on the implications for our legal proceedings was entirely predictable, reflecting David's tendency to analyze every situation through the lens of strategic advantage. What he was beginning to recognize was that the power dynamic in our relationship had been fundamentally different from what he had understood, not just recently, but for years. The financial disclosures for our divorce proceedings will provide complete information about both of our assets and income streams, I replied diplomatically. Robert Kim is preparing comprehensive documentation that will ensure full transparency about our respective financial positions. The mention of Robert Kim, one of Austin's most respected family law attorneys, clearly surprised David further. He had probably assumed that I would use a general practice lawyer or attempt to handle the divorce proceedings without sophisticated legal representation. The reality that I had engaged top-tier professional counsel suggested a level of strategic planning that he was only beginning to appreciate. Robert Kim, David repeated thoughtfully. He handled the Morrison divorce last year. Very expensive, very thorough, very effective at protecting his client's interests. He came highly recommended, I confirmed. Several of my real estate colleagues suggested that complex property portfolios require specialized legal expertise during divorce proceedings. Our conversation continued for another 45 minutes, with David asking detailed questions about my business operations and gradually adjusting his understanding of both my professional capabilities and our family's financial structure. The discussion was remarkably civilized, conducted with the professional courtesy appropriate for a business meeting rather than the emotional intensity typical of divorce-related conversations. What struck me most powerfully was how David's attitude toward me shifted during our meeting as he absorbed information about my real estate portfolio. The patronizing tone he had used when discussing my career during our marriage was replaced by genuine respect for what I had accomplished. The dismissive references to my hobby disappeared entirely as he recognized the sophistication and profitability of my business operations. By the end of our meeting, David had withdrawn his request for lease modifications, apparently recognizing that negotiating rent reductions with his soon-to-be ex-wife would create unnecessarily complicated dynamics in both our business relationship and divorce proceedings. Instead, he expressed satisfaction with his current lease terms and appreciation for the building's professional management. I want you to know that I had no idea about the scope of your business when I chose this apartment, David said as our meeting concluded. If I had understood that you owned the building, I would have looked elsewhere to avoid potential conflicts of interest. Your tenancy hasn't created any conflicts, I assured him. You've been an excellent resident, and the building management has no complaints about your occupancy. From a business perspective, you're exactly the kind of tenant that property owners prefer. David rose from his chair and extended his hand formally, much as he had done when leaving our house several weeks earlier. Thank you for taking this meeting, he said. I'm beginning to understand that I've made some significant misjudgments about your professional capabilities over the years. After David left my office, I sat quietly for several minutes, processing the implications of our conversation and the obvious shift in his perception of our relationship dynamics. For the first time since I had discovered his affair, David was seeing me as a formidable professional rather than a dependent spouse. The realization that I controlled his housing situation, that his rent payments were funding my business expansion, and that my income exceeded his own had fundamentally altered his understanding of the power balance between us. Over the following weeks, the impact of David's revelation became evident in multiple aspects of our divorce proceedings. His attorney, Patricia Hayes, had initially approached our case with the aggressive confidence typical of lawyers representing high-earning husbands in divorce actions. Patricia had assumed that David's corporate salary and presumed control of family finances would provide significant negotiating leverage against a financially dependent spouse. Robert Kim's comprehensive financial disclosures changed Patricia's strategy immediately. The documentation revealed not only the extent of my real estate portfolio, but also David's systematic diversion of family funds to finance his affair with Jessica. The combination of my financial independence and David's documented misconduct eliminated most of Patricia's negotiating advantages. The settlement discussions that followed were remarkably straightforward compared to the protracted battles that often characterize high-asset divorces. David's recognition of his weakened position, combined with his apparent desire to minimize further damage to his reputation and relationship with our children, led to cooperative negotiations rather than adversarial positioning. The final settlement agreement reflected the reality of our respective financial positions rather than traditional assumptions about income and dependency in marriage dissolution. I retained full ownership of my real estate portfolio, recognizing that the properties had been acquired through my independent business activities, using capital I had brought to the marriage or earned through my own professional efforts. David retained his retirement accounts and investment portfolios, which were substantial but not as significant as my real estate assets. We divided our joint savings and checking accounts equally, after accounting for the money David had inappropriately spent on his relationship with Jessica. The family home, which David had assumed would be a major point of contention, was actually one of my premarital real estate investments and remained in my sole ownership. Child support calculations were particularly interesting given that my real estate income exceeded David's salary. Texas child support guidelines are based on the paying parent's income, but the unusual circumstance of the custodial parent earning more than the non-custodial parent created a situation that required careful legal analysis. Ultimately, we agreed on a support arrangement that prioritized the children's needs while recognizing the reality of our respective financial capabilities. The custody arrangement was established with minimal conflict, reflecting David's acknowledgement that his work schedule and new living situation made him unsuitable for primary physical custody. Maya, Lucas, and Sophie would continue living with me in our family home while spending alternating weekends and some holidays with David at the Yikray, Meridian Tower. Throughout these negotiations, I maintained my role as David's landlord with scrupulous professionalism. His rent payments continued to be processed automatically, building maintenance requests were handled through normal channels, and his interactions with property management remained entirely separate from our divorce proceedings. The potential conflict of interest created by our dual relationship was managed through clear boundaries and professional protocols. 6 months after David had moved into the Meridian Tower, believing himself to be starting fresh as an independent bachelor, he found himself in the peculiar position of paying monthly rent to his ex-wife while negotiating child support payments and custody arrangements with the same woman. The apartment he had chosen to impress Jessica and demonstrate his success had become a daily reminder of how thoroughly he had misunderstood the woman he had been married to for 15 years. The financial reality was even more ironically appropriate. David's rent payments at the Meridian Tower, combined with his share of the building's other rental income, were funding my continued expansion into Austin's commercial real estate market. The money he spent on his symbol of independence was actually supporting the business empire he had dismissed as unimportant throughout our marriage. Maya, Lucas, and Sophie adapted to our new family structure with resilience that continued to amaze me. Maya's college planning proceeded smoothly, with both David and me contributing to her educational expenses according to our respective financial capabilities. Lucas thrived in the more peaceful atmosphere of our home while maintaining a positive relationship with his father during weekend visits. Sophie divided her time between our house and David's apartment with apparent contentment, enjoying the different activities available in each location. The children's adjustment was facilitated by the stability that my financial independence provided. Unlike many divorce situations where reduced income forces immediate lifestyle changes, our family's day-to-day routine remained largely unchanged. Maya continued her violin lessons and college preparation activities. Lucas pursued his robotics, interests without financial constraints, and Sophie's art supplies and activity fees were never questioned or reduced. Perhaps most importantly, the children witnessed their mother operating as a successful business professional rather than a financially dependent divorce victim. Maya, in particular, seemed energized by seeing me in my role as a real estate investor and property manager. She began asking questions about business operations and expressing interest in potentially studying business or economics in college. The transformation in how David spoke about me to the children was also notable. Where he had once referenced my work in dismissive terms, he now spoke respectfully about my business accomplishments and professional expertise. This shift in his attitude had a positive impact on how Maya, Lucas, and Sophie viewed both their parents and the reasons for our divorce. The overall resolution of our divorce proceedings was far more favorable than I had dared to hope when I first discovered David's affair. Not only had I protected my financial interests and secured primary custody of our children, but I had also demonstrated that careful strategic planning could transform a potentially devastating betrayal into an opportunity for empowerment and growth. David's assumption that I would passively accept whatever terms he offered had been comprehensively disproven. His belief that I was financially dependent on his generosity had been revealed as completely inaccurate. His dismissive attitude toward my professional capabilities had been exposed as willfully ignorant rather than objectively based. The woman who had discovered her husband's affair and responded with methodical strategic planning rather than emotional devastation had achieved everything she had set out to accomplish. The locked metaphorical doors that had once excluded David from understanding my true capabilities had become the foundation for a new life built on authentic strength rather than accommodation to his limitations. 2 years have passed since that October morning when David loaded his belongings into his BMW and drove away from our Westlake Hills home, believing he was escaping to freedom and independence. As I sit in my expanded office at Chen Properties headquarters, reviewing the quarterly financial reports that show my real estate portfolio has grown to 28 properties worth over $12 million, I reflect on how completely our lives have transformed since that day. The irony of David's situation has only deepened with time. His monthly rent payments to the Meridian Tower have increased twice due to market adjustments and building improvements, meaning he now pays me $4,200 per month for the privilege of living in what he still considers his bachelor sanctuary. Each payment flows directly into my business accounts, funding acquisitions that have made Chen Properties one of Austin's most respected commercial real estate firms. David has never requested another meeting about lease modifications. His tenancy remains exemplary from a business perspective, with payments always on time and no maintenance issues or complaints from other residents. The professional boundary I established between our landlord-tenant relationship and our co-parenting obligations has been maintained scrupulously on both sides, creating a peculiar but functional arrangement that serves everyone's interests. Jessica Walsh married David 6 months ago in a small ceremony at the Austin Country Club, an event that our children attended with polite enthusiasm but no particular emotional investment. The wedding was elegant and tasteful, reflecting Jessica's attention to social presentation and David's appreciation for traditional formality. Maya served as a bridesmaid at David's request, a gesture that demonstrated remarkable maturity and grace for an 18-year-old who understood exactly why her parents' marriage had ended. The newlyweds' living situation has created some interesting dynamics. Jessica moved into David's apartment at the Meridian Tower, making her my tenant by extension, though she remains unaware of this relationship. She has expressed satisfaction with their downtown lifestyle to mutual acquaintances, apparently enjoying the urban amenities and cultural activities that Austin's city center provides. What she doesn't know is that her appreciation for their residence directly benefits the woman whose marriage her relationship with David helped to end. David's financial situation has become increasingly complex as he has tried to maintain the lifestyle that initially attracted Jessica while managing the ongoing costs of child support, private school tuition, and his own living expenses. His corporate salary, while substantial, has proven insufficient to support both his new marriage and his obligations to our children without careful budgeting. The irony is that the money he pays to me as his landlord significantly exceeds his child support payments, meaning that I receive more revenue from his tenancy than from his legally mandated contributions to Maya, Lucas, and Sophie's welfare. This financial dynamic has created subtle tensions in David's new marriage that have occasionally been visible during school events and family gatherings. Jessica's lifestyle expectations, shaped by her years as a successful executive assistant, accustomed to the perquisites of corporate life, don't always align with the economic reality of David's post-divorce budget. I've observed her disappointment when their vacation plans are scaled back, or when David declines expensive social activities that they previously enjoyed during their affair. Maya graduated from Westlake High School as valedictorian and chose to attend Rice University, where she's pursuing a double major in business and music performance. Her college years have been financially secure due to the education fund I established using profits from my real estate investments, supplemented by David's contributions according to our divorce agreement. Maya's academic success and personal growth have been remarkable to witness, and I take particular pride in how she has navigated the complexities of our family situation with wisdom beyond her years. During her sophomore year at Rice, Maya expressed interest in learning about real estate investment as a potential career path. We began spending her semester breaks visiting properties, reviewing financial analyses, and discussing market trends. Her analytical mind, inherited from both parents, has proven well-suited to understanding the complexities of commercial real estate, and she has become genuinely excited about the possibility of joining Chen Properties after graduation. "I want to understand what you built while Dad was dismissing it as a hobby," Maya told me during one of our property tours. "It's incredible that you created all of this while managing our family and dealing with his complete lack of support. I want to learn how to build something substantial on my own terms." Her perspective on our family's history is clear-eyed and mature, reflecting conversations we've had about the importance of financial independence and professional fulfillment for women. Maya witnessed firsthand how my business success provided stability during our family's crisis, and she has drawn her own conclusions about the value of building career assets that can't be controlled or dismissed by others. Lucas is now 15 and has developed into a remarkably talented young engineer. His robotics projects have won several regional competitions, and he's been accepted into advanced placement programs that will allow him to graduate high school with college credits in computer science and mathematics. His relationship with David has evolved into a comfortable mentorship focused on technical problem-solving and academic achievement, while avoiding the emotional complications that marked the early years after our divorce. Lucas spends his weekend visits with David working on programming projects and discussing technology trends, activities that provide genuine connection without forcing artificial intimacy. David has learned to appreciate Lucas's intellectual gifts without trying to reshape him into a reflection of his own ambitions, a development that has strengthened their relationship considerably. "Dad's actually pretty good at explaining complex algorithms," Lucas observed recently. "He approaches programming problems the same way he handles business analysis. It's when he tries to talk about feelings that everything gets weird." This insight reflects Lucas's pragmatic acceptance of David's limitations as an emotional communicator, while recognizing his genuine strengths as a mentor and intellectual guide. Their relationship has found a sustainable equilibrium based on shared interests rather than forced intimacy, which serves both of them well. Sophie, now 11, has blossomed into a confident and creative young artist whose work has been featured in several local exhibitions. Her art teachers describe her as exceptionally talented for her age, with a sophisticated understanding of color, composition, and emotional expression. Sophie divides her time between our homes with apparent contentment, adapting her creative projects to the different resources available in each location. At our house, Sophie has converted the former guest bedroom into her art studio, complete with professional-grade supplies and specialized lighting that supports her increasingly ambitious projects. At David's apartment, she works with more portable materials, but enjoys the city views that inspire her urban landscape paintings. The contrast between her two creative environments has actually enhanced her artistic development, providing diverse sources of inspiration and technical challenges. Sophie's relationship with Jessica has developed into genuine friendship, something that initially surprised me but has proven beneficial for everyone involved. Jessica has no children of her own and has embraced a mentoring role with Sophie, particularly regarding art and creative expression. They visit museums together, attend art classes, and collaborate on projects that have helped Sophie expand her technical skills and artistic confidence. Jessica actually understands art in ways that Dad doesn't, Sophie explained to me recently. She helps me think about composition and color theory, and she doesn't try to make everything into a lesson about practical skills. This relationship has eliminated potential conflict between Jessica and our children while providing Sophie with an additional adult mentor who shares her creative interests. I'm grateful that David's second marriage has brought positive influences into our children's lives, rather than creating the complications that often accompany blended family situations. My own romantic life has evolved slowly and deliberately over the past 2 years. 6 months ago, I began dating Michael Chen, a fellow real estate investor who specializes in sustainable development projects throughout Texas. Michael and I met at a commercial property conference in Dallas, where we discovered shared interests in both real estate investment and environmental sustainability. Michael's approach to relationships reflects the same thoughtful strategy he brings to his business operations. He has been patient about meeting my children, respectful of my priorities as a single mother, and genuinely interested in my professional accomplishments rather than threatened by my success. His own business achievements, which include developing several award-winning green building projects, have earned my respect and admiration. The coincidence of our shared surname has prompted jokes from friends and colleagues, but Michael and I appreciate the symbolic appropriateness of two people named Chen, building something meaningful together. We're both financially independent, professionally fulfilled, and emotionally mature enough to create a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than necessity or convenience. Maya has expressed approval of Michael after several family dinners and group activities. He asks questions about your business because he's genuinely interested, not because he's trying to impress you, she observed. And he talks to Lucas and Sophie like they're actual people, not accessories to your life. Lucas appreciates Michael's knowledge of sustainable technology and has engaged him in detailed discussions about renewable energy systems and smart building design. Sophie enjoys Michael's artistic sensibility and his thoughtful responses to her creative projects. Most importantly, Michael has made no attempt to position himself as a replacement father figure, instead developing independent relationships with each child based on their individual interests and personalities. My business operations have expanded far beyond what I could have imagined when I purchased my first duplex 8 years ago. Chen Properties now manages residential and commercial properties throughout Central Texas, with a particular focus on sustainable development and affordable housing initiatives. The company employs 12 full-time staff members and has established partnerships with major developers, financial institutions, and municipal agencies. The success of my business has attracted attention from local media and industry organizations. Last year, I was named Austin's Small Business Woman of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce, recognition that validated the professional respect I had earned through consistent performance and ethical business practices. The award ceremony was attended by Maya, Lucas, and Sophie, who beamed with pride as I accepted the honor. David attended the ceremony as well, accompanied by Jessica, both of them offering congratulations with apparent sincerity. David's brief speech during the reception surprised many attendees with its genuine appreciation for my business accomplishments and his acknowledgement of his failure to recognize my professional potential during our marriage. Emma built something remarkable while I was too focused on my own career to notice, David told the audience. She demonstrated that vision, persistence, and strategic thinking can create opportunities that others don't even recognize exist. I'm proud of what she's accomplished, and I'm grateful that our children have her example of professional excellence to guide their own ambitions. His public recognition of my business success represented a significant evolution from the man who had once dismissed my real estate investments as a hobby. While our marriage couldn't be salvaged, David had clearly learned to appreciate qualities in me that he had previously overlooked or undervalued. The financial security that my real estate portfolio provides has allowed me to pursue philanthropic interests that align with my values and community priorities. I've established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing business or entrepreneurship programs, focusing particularly on women and minority students who might not otherwise have access to higher education opportunities. Additionally, Chen Properties has partnered with local nonprofits to develop affordable housing projects that serve working families priced out of Austin's rapidly appreciating real estate market. These initiatives combine my business expertise with my commitment to ensuring that Austin's economic growth benefits all residents, not just those with substantial financial resources. The scholarship recipients have become an extended family of sorts, with many of them working part-time for Chen Properties while completing their studies. Their energy, diverse perspectives, and fresh ideas have enriched my business operations, while providing them with practical experience in real estate, finance, and entrepreneurship. You're creating opportunities for other people the way you created them for yourself, Maya observed after attending a scholarship award ceremony. Dad never understood that business success isn't just about making money. It's about building something that creates value for everyone involved. Her insight reflects a sophisticated understanding of business ethics and social responsibility that I hope will guide her own professional development. The lessons she's learned from witnessing my career evolution extend far beyond technical skills or financial acumen to include fundamental principles about integrity, persistence, and the importance of creating opportunities for others. The relationship between David and me has stabilized into a respectful co-parenting partnership that prioritizes our children's welfare while maintaining appropriate boundaries around our personal lives. We communicate regularly about Maya's college progress, Lucas's academic achievements, and Sophie's artistic development, but we avoid discussing our respective romantic relationships or business decisions unless they directly affect the children. This functional arrangement has been beneficial for everyone involved, particularly Maya, Lucas, and Sophie, who have been spared the ongoing conflict that often characterizes post-divorce family dynamics. Our children have learned that adult relationships can evolve and change without destroying the love and commitment that parents feel for them. David's tenancy at the Meridian Tower continues without incident, and his lease has been renewed twice with standard terms and market rate adjustments. He has never again requested a meeting about lease modifications, and our landlord-tenant relationship remains entirely separate from our co-parenting responsibilities. The monthly rent payments continue to flow into Chen Properties accounts, providing steady income that supports my ongoing business expansion. The poetic justice of this arrangement has not diminished with time. Every month, David transfers money to the woman whose professional capabilities he had dismissed for years, funding the business empire he had characterized as unimportant. The apartment he chose to impress Jessica and demonstrate his independence has become a symbol of his complete misunderstanding of the power dynamics in our relationship. Recent months have brought new developments that illustrate how completely our situations have evolved since our divorce. David's employer, Meridian Tech Solutions, has experienced financial difficulties due to increased competition and market changes. While David's position remains secure, his opportunities for advancement have become limited, and his salary increases have not kept pace with Austin's cost of living. Meanwhile, Chen Properties has continued to grow and prosper, benefiting from Austin's economic expansion and my strategic investment decisions. The contrast between our respective financial trajectories has become increasingly apparent, particularly as David and Jessica have been forced to scale back their lifestyle expectations while my business success has provided increasing opportunities for growth and philanthropy. This reversal of fortune has created some awkward moments during family events and social gatherings where mutual acquaintances compare our post-divorce circumstances. David has handled these situations with dignity, acknowledging my business success without appearing bitter about the contrast with his own career challenges. Jessica has been less graceful in adjusting to their financial limitations, occasionally making comments that reveal her disappointment with the lifestyle constraints imposed by David's budget. These tensions have been noticeable to our children, who have learned valuable lessons about the importance of financial independence and the dangers of building relationships based primarily on material expectations. Maya has been particularly observant about the dynamics between David and Jessica, drawing her own conclusions about the importance of choosing partners who appreciate personal qualities beyond financial status. Jessica fell in love with Dad's image of success, Maya noted recently. But that image was based on assumptions about your dependence that turned out to be completely wrong. Now she's discovering that Dad, without you supporting his career, isn't the same person she thought she was marrying. This mature analysis reflects Maya's sophisticated understanding of relationship dynamics and her appreciation for the complex factors that contribute to long-term compatibility between partners. Her observations have sparked discussions about the importance of building relationships on shared values and mutual respect, rather than external circumstances or superficial attractions. Looking toward the future, I feel profound gratitude for the painful catalyst that initiated my transformation from financially dependent spouse to successful entrepreneur and property owner. David's betrayal, devastating as it was at the time, forced me to rediscover strengths and capabilities that had been dormant during our marriage. The woman who changed the locks on her cheating husband, metaphorically speaking, was actually unlocking her own potential for growth, independence, and authentic success. The strategic planning that enabled me to outmaneuver David's assumptions about my capabilities has evolved into business skills that serve me daily in increasingly complex real estate transactions and corporate partnerships. Maya will graduate from Rice University next year with job offers from several prestigious companies, but she has expressed strong interest in joining Chen Properties as a junior partner after gaining some outside experience. Her academic achievements, combined with her practical knowledge of our business operations, position her to make significant contributions to our continued expansion. Lucas has been accepted into accelerated programs at both UT Austin and Texas A&M, with scholarship offers that will cover his entire undergraduate education. His robotics achievements have attracted attention from technology companies that recruit promising high school students for internship and mentorship programs. His future appears limitless, supported by the financial security that my business success has provided. Sophie's artistic talents continue to develop rapidly, with several art teachers suggesting that she has professional potential if she chooses to pursue creative careers. Her confidence and creative vision have been nurtured by the stability of our family environment and the diverse influences provided by her relationships with both parents. Michael and I have begun discussing marriage, though we're proceeding slowly to ensure that any decision we make serves the interests of both our families. His children from his previous marriage are adults living independently, but Maya, Lucas, and Sophie remain my primary priority in all major life decisions. The possibility of combining our business operations has generated exciting conversations about sustainable development projects that could benefit both our portfolios while advancing environmental initiatives throughout Texas. Our shared values regarding business ethics, community responsibility, and family priorities suggest that a partnership between us could be both personally fulfilling and professionally advantageous. The transformation of my life over the past 2 years has exceeded anything I could have imagined when I first discovered David's affair. What began as a response to betrayal has evolved into a comprehensive rebuilding of my identity, my financial independence, and my future possibilities. The real estate portfolio that David dismissed as a hobby has become the foundation for a business empire that provides not only financial security, but also opportunities to create positive impact in my community. The woman he underestimated has demonstrated capabilities that surprised even herself, building something substantial and lasting from the ruins of a relationship that had constrained her growth for too many years. Perhaps most importantly, my children have witnessed their mother's transformation from dependent spouse to successful entrepreneur. learning lessons about resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of building lives based on authentic values rather than external expectations. They have seen that betrayal can become the catalyst for growth, that endings can create space for better beginnings, and that careful planning combined with determined effort can overcome circumstances that initially appear devastating. The monthly rent checks that David writes to Chen Properties LLC serve as regular reminders of how completely he misunderstood the woman he chose to abandon. The luxury apartment he selected to impress his secretary has become a symbol of his financial dependence on the business he had dismissed as unimportant. Every payment he makes funds my continued investment in properties he never bothered to understand, supporting expansion into markets he never recognized as opportunities. The woman who once accommodated his assumptions about her limitations now controls an aspect of his daily life that he depends on but cannot influence. This poetic justice feels appropriate not because it represents revenge, but because it demonstrates that authentic strength and capability will ultimately be recognized and rewarded, regardless of whether others choose to acknowledge them initially. David's failure to appreciate my potential during our marriage created opportunities for me to build something independent of his recognition or approval. The locked doors that symbolically excluded him from understanding my true capabilities have become the foundation for a life built on my own terms, supported by my own achievements, and directed toward goals that reflect my authentic values, rather than accommodation to his expectations. As I review the latest financial reports showing Chen Properties' continued growth and success, I feel profound satisfaction, not just in what I've built, but in how I've built it. The strategic patience that enabled me to outmaneuver David's assumptions has evolved into business wisdom that serves me in increasingly complex professional challenges. The woman who discovered her husband's betrayal and responded with methodical planning rather than emotional devastation has created a legacy that extends far beyond financial success. Maya, Lucas, and Sophie have learned that strength can emerge from adversity, that careful planning can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and that authentic success comes from building something meaningful rather than simply reacting to others' choices. David's rent payments will continue flowing into my accounts for the foreseeable future, a monthly reminder of the woman he failed to appreciate and the opportunities he missed by underestimating her potential. But more importantly, those payments fund continued growth, community investment, and family security that reflect my values and priorities rather than his assumptions. The transformation is complete, but the story continues to unfold with new possibilities, new challenges, and new opportunities to demonstrate that the most devastating betrayals can become the catalysts for the most authentic and lasting success. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.